We should be live.
We
Are we
are
live?
live. Yes, yes, yes.
Welcome everyone to another Facebook Live with Dr. Nelva Bryant. We are happy to be here on this Friday. It's gloomy where I am. I don't know about the rest of you. Do you have storms where you are?
No storms, but our power went out about an hour ago, which shocked us. I was like, oh boy, don't let me have to run out of the house and figure out get internet service elsewhere. But we're doing fine. It is kind of gloomy. Weather is cooler, which is kind of refreshing.
Yes. Well, it was amazing that we had Dr. Mann with us with the last Facebook Live. And all of a sudden, after we bring him up and the topic about brachycephalic breeds and the trouble that they have and the surgery he provides to give them relief, that's when we get a hot story about I think it was a Frenchie on
It was.
JetBlue
Mm-hmm. That is.
that had trouble breathing, and he was about to die. He was turning blue and everything, and I was so proud to hear about what the crew on JetBlue did to save that baby's life, and that was pretty amazing. And I
Yeah.
wanted to bring that up to you because I wanted to ask: are there little emergency training that all airlines provide to their, I guess, their flight attendants? Is that something that you provide, or you're working on for Delta, or do you know if that's like a standard thing?
Yeah, I don't, to be honest with you, just back up a little bit and I'll get to your question in 1 second if you don't mind. But yeah, um, Dr. Boaz Mann was with us, I think about maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we were talking about brachycephalic breeds and the issues behind them, which of course really have a negative impact during transport. But the greatest thing about Dr. Boaz Mann is that he does laser surgery to repair these dogs. It's almost like facial reconstruction, which is kind of cool that he repairs
Yeah.
them so they now can breathe better. And it's more than just the nostrils. He goes in and actually, with the brachycephalic syndrome, it's BOAS, brachycephalic obstructive airway syndrome. They have also an elongated soft palate. So he's using also laser surgery to correct that too. But so he was here sharing us that with that, and we have kept constant contact with them. He's a great resource with information. Yeah. And when he shared, he texted us both and shared that information about the French Bulldog and JetBlue. And before reading it, I was like, oh God.
Well, that wasn't him.
It was like, let it not be a negative situation. Please no. And then after
that
reading
wasn't him. That was one of our followers shared the story, and then I shared it.
Oh, he texted me also. He texted me. I'm sorry. I thought you were on it. He texted me also, and I thought it was going to be negative, but it turned out to be a wonderful outcome. Those flight attendants provided oxygen to the dog when it was definitely needed. I don't know if you heard from that, though. That was against their internal policies in reference to their actions. They realized it was against it, but it saved a life. So it goes to show you maybe we should start looking at these policies, to see if potentially in these situations, what can be done to help them and everything. So I haven't really done anything like that with Delta. No. I think as JetBlue, I read somewhere, but at JetBlue, it said it's against normal policy to do that. But the actions of those flight attendants are definitely needed, and maybe needing to reevaluate those policies in reference to that.
So they actually have a policy that would not allow them to.
It's not the normal thing. It's not the normal thing to do. It's not the norm.
So what would the norm be?
I think the oxygen canisters are usually there for people. It's just meaning it's not there for the animal's purpose. They didn't buy that there for that animal's purpose. It was there, I guess, for emergency cases for people. So for it to be used for an animal isn't the norm. It's not the norm.
Okay.
That's what I mean.
Okay. Because I would think that, the oxygen is there for any one in distress.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't.
No,
Did JetBlue did
mhm.
JetBlue say something that they shouldn't have done that?
No, from what I read, I was under the impression that they said they knew it was against the normal policies, but they went ahead and used it for the pet. I don't think it's a normal policy. I mean, how often? Maybe now again, if pets start traveling even more in cabin, and then we're also recognizing particular breeds, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a brachycephalic breed that could need oxygen during transport. But maybe now with more pets being transported in cabin, maybe that'll facilitate a change for a just in case situation on their behalf.
Is this one of the things that your position will work on either now or in the future in creating new policies in assisting pets in need while they're flying in cabin?
Yeah. I'll be honest, where I'm sitting within Delta, I'm sitting within cargo. I do have an influence or I can make suggestions for in cabin, but I'm not the final ruling on situations that happen that way. So I can make a suggestion, but I can't. That's for them to decide. But I think it is a good idea to potentially be able to take care of pets in need while they're in cabin in reference to that if they need something. It's kind of interesting. It's going to get to the point. It's going to get to the point, I think, in time where, you know, how have you ever been on an aircraft where someone got ill and they'll announce, is there a medical professional on board? Is there a doctor or something? And that person goes to assist them, to assist the person in need. I'm wondering if one day it's ever going to get to the point where they say, is there a veterinarian on board to assist a pet or something like that if something is needed? But again, it's going to develop over time. The more pets being transported in cabin is going to probably facilitate or just warrant a change in some of the policies.
Well, I gotta say, I must applaud the crew that, with quick thinking, saved a life like that because, I don't think any pet parent could imagine flying and, this is happening and there's a can of oxygen there and nobody is trying to help. So
Mm-hmm.
I do applaud them for doing what they did to make sure that this baby survived that situation.
Right. I'm glad they knew what to do too, because sometimes, emergencies, a lot of folks that don't have maybe a background or an understanding, I bet you one of those flight attendants, or probably more than one of them, were pet owners themselves because they kind of had an idea what was needed and went ahead and done it. So I think it's great what they did, and they jumped in and really saved the life of that dog. Because, like I said, when I first saw the text message that from Dr. Mann sending to me, without reading the article, I was like, oh boy, here we go again. But I'm so happy this was a positive outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know it was a big conversation, especially on our social feed, with so many pet parents chiming in, and people really applauding. And I heard that the flight staff on JetBlue in particular, they have done a few other things to help dogs in distress. So I guess they have a lot of maybe pet parents that are flight attendants, which helps. I mean, we're everywhere, so and we have all kinds of jobs, so it really does help. But you never know when you need those. And I know there's a place that actually teaches little, no, I shouldn't say little, teaches medical things for you to learn.
CPR?
Like, yep, CPR is one of them. And so it's nice for us to all kind of know that. And I'm wondering if airlines will even go into maybe having a canister of oxygen just for dogs if they don't want to use the one for humans there, or at least have a mask for dogs and cats.
Yeah.
Because I know firehouses have those now. There are specific oxygen canisters with specific masks for cats and dogs. So maybe,
Yeah, I think it's great. They should have something to start again. It's going to facilitate some change over time, and it would be great to have something portable and easy, just in case. Even just in case things for CPR, first aid, something for them, just in case. You just never know when you need that that for them and everything.
Yeah.
And again, if it's a person, again, you never know for a person when you might need it. So these are things they have to consider. Airlines will eventually have to consider when they're transporting pets in cabin. I think another thing that's going to change too over time, I'm hoping for this change, is that, and I've seen it outside of the U.S., not in the U.S. I don't think I've seen it at all, actually, all in the U.S. I believe that there needs to be more people with animal backgrounds, animal care, or technicians, veterinary technicians or assistants working in the airline as far as even cargo handling and all that. Bring those in there that are familiar with animals, familiar with identifying any issues with them and being able to respond to them quickly because they're familiar, to actually help with handling and stuff of pets. I think that's going to be another positive change for the airline industry as well.
Absolutely. Well, on a completely different end of animals, I'm really excited to get Dr. Doug Mader on with us. So let's bring him in so that we can talk about exotics.
Awesome.
Good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you all for having me join you today.
Oh,
you're welcome. I'm going to quickly read your bio and then we're going to get this started because there's a lot of people excited to know that they know you're here. So let me introduce Dr. Douglas Mader, triple board veterinary specialist that lives in the Conch. Did I say that correctly? Conch Republic?
Got it. Conch Republic.
Okay. Dr. Mader acquired his Doctor of Veterinary Medicine and residency in primate and zoo animal medicine from the University of California, Davis. He is the consulting veterinarian for the Monroe County Sheriff's Zoo, the Key West Aquarium, the Sea Turtle Hospital, the Everglades Alligator Farm, and the Key Deer Refuge. Dr. Mader is an internationally acclaimed lecturer and is on the review boards of several scientific journals. His many awards include the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Conservation Award, the Fred L. Fry Lifetime Achievement Award, and the UC Davis School of Vet Medicine Alumni Achievement Award. He has published numerous articles in scientific journals, magazines, and is the author of 3 textbooks on reptile medicine and surgery. Dr. Mader's latest publication is his new book, The Vet at Noah's Ark, Stories of Survival from an Inner City Animal Hospital. This book is also a PBS Masterpiece Theater selected Vet at Noah's Ark, the 2024 Animal Book of the Year. Everyone, please help me welcome Dr. Douglas Mader. I got to tell you, we are so excited we have our applause machine. So it gives me a great pleasure to do that.
Thank you. That's quite a welcome.
Yeah.
Well,
very happy you're here. My goodness. Very happy you're here. I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off. Did you have something to say?
No,
go ahead.
No, very happy you're here. Thank you so much. Rochelle Rogers recommended you to us, and I think this is going to be a great session because there's a lot of folks out there that, well, your background with different exotics, different animals. A lot of folks want to know about, what if I have a pet bird or iguana and I want to transport it? So this is going to be a great opportunity for everyone to kind of hear about preparation for that and just your experiences too. So I want you to feel free to just share. We can talk about travel, yes, but I want to hear about your background. I want to hear about just a lot of things you're doing in your book too, please.
Sure, you got it. Well, basically I've been a veterinarian for just shy of 4 decades. And the book that I wrote was about the years that I lived in Los Angeles in the early 90s. And I've always liked teaching. I've always liked writing. And when you do that kind of stuff, it's important to have credentials. And even though I was I think one of the early pioneers in exotic animal medicine, because at the time there were only 2 vet schools teaching exotic animal medicine. So when I got into practice, I had to do a lot of extra studying on my own. But I found that when I was going to teach and lecture, the dog and cat veterinary specialists didn't consider that I was an expert because I didn't have any board certification after my name.
Mm.
So I decided what I would do is I would get board certified in dog and cat medicine, and then that would give me the credentials that I needed. So when I went and talked about exotic animals, I would be a credentialed expert. And that's kind of where the book started. Is it's about the year that I applied for and studied for, and then took my boards in dog and cat medicine in the early 90s. I know that's not too exciting, but it just so happened that the year I was doing that happened to be the same year as the civil unrest in Los Angeles around the Rodney King riots, which is, I'm sure you all remember, and some of our listeners may not have been born then, but it was a pretty dark time in race relations in Los Angeles, United States. Sadly, a lot of things haven't changed, but let's not get into that today.
Right.
But anyway, it was about working in this hospital, literally in the inner city, and dealing with the stress of, all the crime and the gangs and everything else that went along with living in the inner city, but at the same time protecting the human-animal bond. So, there's lots of great stories that came out of that, and I think there's a really good segue here. One of the stories in the book is about a woman that wanted to travel to Australia with her pet iguana. So it seems like a perfect story to share with you. I don't know if you've covered Australia before. You probably have, but I'm sure you know, Australia has
I definitely know. Well, you know what? I don't think we've touched on Australia per se, but we know the internet. I know personally the the importation requirements for dogs and cats going into Australia has changed, and it's very stringent to get there. We have talked about Australia before. The Johnny Depp story way back when, where he tried to get in. So yeah, we've spoken about Australia. They're very strict and very stringent with their importation requirements. So I imagine for an iguana, that's tough, right?
That's a no-no. Yeah, so basically the little vignette starts out with myself, and I always have a vet student with me everywhere I go. For my whole career, I've always mentored veterinary students. And we went to go check in the next room, and the receptionist gave me the chart, and she started to laugh. She goes, "You're going to love this next client." I said, "Why?" And she goes, "You'll see." So I walked in the room, and this is in Los Angeles in August. And typical Los Angeles August day, 95, maybe 100 degrees, covered with smog, extremely hot. Walked in the exam room, and there's a woman in there, kind of portly, wearing a big puffy down jacket. It's like something you would wear in the middle of winter. And so I walked in the room, and I had the chart in front of me, and I looked at it, and it says health certificate for iguana to Australia. And I'm thinking, this isn't going to happen, because Australia, they have a zero tolerance. They do not allow it. So I walked in the room, introduced myself, introduced the student, and I said, "I understand you're looking for a health certificate to go to Australia for your iguana." And she goes, "No, that's not what I want." And I said, "Well, okay, I apologize. I'm confused. The form said health certificate." She goes, "I know you can't take iguanas in Australia." She goes, "That's not what I need." I go, "Okay, so what is it that you need? How can I help you?" She goes, "I need tranquilizers." I go, "Tranquilizers?" She goes, "Yes, for my iguana." And I said, "I'm not even going to go there, because if you try and take that iguana to Australia, they will not only confiscate it, but they're going to kill it." I didn't use the word euthanize, because that was too nice. I wanted to be real plain. I said, if you go there, they will confiscate it at the airport and they will kill it. They're not going to send it back to the United States. I said, Australia is really strict. They will kill your pet. And I said, "I know you love it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be taking it to Australia." And she goes, "Well, they're never going to find it." And I said, "Ma'am," I said, "they're going to find it." And she goes, "See if you can find it." And I looked at her, and I looked at the student, and I assumed she had it hidden in this big fluffy down jacket. Okay. So she unzips the jacket, she hands it, puts it on the table. I pointed to the student, he takes the jacket, and he takes his hands and he squeezes the jacket, he turns it inside out, and he goes, "No iguana, doc." And I said, "Okay." And she goes, "See?" And I go, "But still," I said, "if I give you a tranquilizer and you try and do it, they're gonna take it and they're gonna kill it." And she goes, "You're not going to find it." And I said, "Well, then how do you plan on getting it in there?" And she goes like this. Next thing I know, she unbuttons her shirt. She takes her shirt off. She holds it. She shakes it, puts it on the table. She's just wearing her brassiere. And she's a fairly corpulent woman. And then I'm looking at her, and then she reaches behind her. She takes her brassiere off. She hands the brassiere. She dangles it, and she puts it on the table. And she goes, "No iguana." And I said, "Okay, you got me. Where is it?" And then she grabs some of her anatomy and lifts it up. And underneath her anatomy, tucked in a stockinette, was a 3-foot long iguana that she had hidden underneath her body parts. And she goes, "See, they're never going to check here." Keep in mind, this is in the early 90s. So this is before they had all the fancy scanners and everything else. And I looked at her and I says, I said, I think that's really cruel. I said, "I can give you a tranquilizer that'll last for maybe 4 or 5 hours. It's not going to last for 17 hours, which is how long the flight was." And she goes, "Well, I'll just get up and I'll go to the restroom and I'll give it some more tranquilizer." And I says, "I'm not going to be part of this." I said, "If something goes wrong, that animal could die. And I wouldn't want that on my conscience." And I said, "And if you get there and they find it, they're going to kill it." And so she ended up walking out. And I don't know if she ever got a veterinarian to give her a tranquilizer or not. But, some of these stories, they're too good to be true, but you can't make up the really good stuff. I mean, you can't fake the really good stuff. It's stuff that really happens.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think she just thought you were cute and wanted to take off the clothes.
I hope not. Maybe my students. But traveling with exotic pets, let's break that down into 2 groups. Let's say traveling on airplanes and then just traveling. Okay, so going on vacation, I think the latest statistics, something like 90% of people own pets. 78% of the people that have pets vacation with their pets. They travel in a car, travel in the RV, that kind of stuff. So we have traveling with exotics in a car, or traveling with exotics, let's say, in a plane. So we have time. Let's break it down into 2 groups. So depending on what kind of exotic you have, traveling with fish can be very problematic. And I don't think we can even get into that right now, because obviously, years and years ago, my older sister went to school at San Jose State, but we lived in Hawaii. And so she would get a little, like your water bottle that you're drinking out of, Dr. Bryant, and she would put her pet betta fish in there, and she would put it in her carry-on bag, and she'd go back and forth to college with it. They didn't care back then. Now they do. So some fish that are air breathers, like a betta fish, maybe some goldfish, yeah, you can put them in a small tank, put in fresh water. You can put them in your RV or in your camper van or in your car. You can travel pretty well. But if you've got a big tank, like a saltwater tank or a freshwater tank, forget it. We're not going to talk about traveling with those. Traveling with birds, a lot of people travel with pet birds. You can put them in a small cage. I have a macaw, and she's 30 years old, and she goes with me places in the car. And she has a little perch in my SUV that I set up in the back seat. She rides great. Some pets do get car sick, as I'm sure you've probably talked about before. So as with any pet, whether it's a rabbit or a hamster or a bird, you start with taking them in the car, putting them in their carrier, putting them on their perch, make sure they're secure so they don't get injured, giving them a little food and water, entertaining them in the car, and then taking them out. And then you gradually habituate them to the vehicle, then you turn on the car, and then you go for a ride around the block, and you go for a ride, downtown, and then maybe you go for a couple hours. You can teach them how to do it. And then it becomes a pleasurable experience for them, as opposed to how many times have you talked with client owners? They put Fido in the car to go to the veterinarian, and every time the dog goes in the car, it goes to the vet and gets a tooth pulled or something, or an anal gland expressed. So now every time that dog goes in the car, it's scared to death, because that's the only association it has. So we just need to habituate them and to train them that cars are not a bad thing, and it's not always going to a bad place. And then a lot of them will actually be excited about going for rides. As far as tranquilizers go and seasickness things go, there are some dogs, especially dogs, can get very, very car sick. Well, exotic pets can get car sick too, again, if they're not used to it. The thing is, where I've got to be really careful, and we have to be really careful, is there aren't any published studies that say, I can go to a journal and look up a reference and say, oh yes, for a car sick hamster, here's the drug you use. and then you can back it up with something in print. That just doesn't exist.
Right.
Right.
So
So
let me, if you don't mind, I'm gonna stop you for a quick second.
Yeah.
And just to agree with you, there's a lot of information out. It's even just saying pet travel. There's a lot of information that's not really out there to help folks, in reference to that. I remember, and when I say pet travel, like many years ago, it wasn't based in the US. There were studies on animals or dogs, and they maybe detected their stress levels, see if they're stressed, as far as cortisol and all these different studies they did to see if actually there was a study where they gave a sedative to some and none to others and checked their cortisol levels and found that the cortisol levels did not change despite a sedative. So sedatives are not really changing the stress of that whole process. But this is the older study, not US based. And I'm saying that to say, basically, you're right. There's no studies to help folks in reference to a lot of things in certain situations to deal with it and everything.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the reason I bring that up is kind of a legal issue, because I don't want people to say, well, hey, Dr. Mader said on Dr. Bryant's show that you can give a rabbit blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I did it and then it died. You have to be really careful, because there's nothing in print, no scientific background that backs it up. Now, that being said, my wife is also a veterinarian, and she is a holistic veterinarian. She's got over 2 decades doing holistic medicine. And there are several herbs and fragrances that can be used that aren't considered drugs. And so those are things we can talk about. So I'm sure you've heard of things like Bach Flower Remedy and Rescue Remedy. They're combinations of different herbs and fragrances, and they have calming effects.
Mm-hmm.
And they come in usually a tincture, which is like a liquid, and then they come in a spray. And what I strongly recommend people do, like let's say you're taking your rabbit for a ride to go visit your uncle 6 hours away. You get the rabbit used to riding in the carrier. But before you do, you put the rabbit's comfortable clothes in there or some blankets, and then you get this Bach Flower spray or Rescue Remedy spray, and you spray it in the cage. And then that puts the essence in the cage, and that's a calming essence. So then when the rabbit goes in there, it calms down. Now, other things you can do too is you can get the tincture of Bach Flower or the tincture of Rescue Remedy, put a drop on the inside of the little rabbit's ear, and then just kind of rub it on the skin on the inside of the ear, and it'll slowly absorb into the system of the rabbit, and that helps calm it down. Mm-hmm. These are natural sedatives, natural calming products that are very safe. Yeah. And I have recommended those for multiple different pets. Now, there's a big
question before you go. Where would someone find something like that? Because I'm all for a holistic approach. Anything that's going to cause sedation during transport really shouldn't be used, but you want to calm them down. I get that, but to be sedated, you don't want that. So how can
I'm actually going to hit on prescription sedation in a second here, but that's a really good point. Where can you get it? The beauty of nowadays is the internet. I mean, you can go on the big Amazon and you can find any of that stuff on there and just click and you order it. Next thing you go, a couple of days later, you got it. You're ready to go.
What is it called again?
Bach Flower Remedy and Rescue Remedy.
Flower?
Bach, B-A-C-H. And Rescue Remedy. And then other essential oils would be like chamomile, lavender. They all have very calming effects. That's why, like, you can go into Walmart or a place like that and you can buy these diffusers that you plug into your house, mm-hmm. and it's just lavender, and it just makes the house feel relaxing and comfortable. And it's the same effect that it has on animals as well. And those are, a lot of people are worried about anything aerosol around birds. Those are very safe to use around birds.
That's good to know. Yeah, you got to be real for folks that don't know, you got to be really careful with birds. Is it still, as I remember, as far as bird studies or earlier with my education with birds, are they still Teflon coating and all that stuff toxic to birds?
As far as I know, it is. So, I mean, there's a lot of literature on it. This is like if you're using a Teflon pan. If you're using a Teflon pan and there's a bird in the room, no big deal. Okay. If you use a Teflon pan and you walk away and the pan burns, the bird's going to die because of the aerosols that are produced in the Teflon when it burns. It's extremely toxic. Yeah. Extremely toxic. Yeah, as I told you, I have a macaw in my kitchen opened up to my living room. And
how old is your macaw?
30.
Wow.
She'll be around a lot longer than I will. Yeah. Let's go back and touch on that prescription stuff that we talked about. You brought it up, and I think it's because you know the answer. it's actually against the law, or I know a lot of the major airlines like Delta, Alaska, Hawaiian, American, they have specific statements saying you cannot transport a sedated pet. They won't allow it. Okay. But interestingly enough, they do allow you to transport sedated exotics, you know? And so I always thought that was kind of interesting. So like, why they allow the sedated exotics, which actually has less data behind it than dogs and cats, but it says right in a lot of the written requirements and written protocols that you can transmit specifically laboratory animals, and they call them cold bloods, which I hate that term because there is no such thing. But what they're referring to, of course, is amphibians, snakes, invertebrates, and things like that. So you are allowed to sedate those. However, let's just be really straight up on that. If you use any kind of a drug on any animal, that falls into the category where it's allowable. So spider, amphibian, iguana, whatever the case may be, it has to be done under the written prescription of a veterinarian with a copy of the prescription in the record. That has to have all the side effects, the expected length of time. It has to have a copy of the label of the drug with the date and the lot number of the drug on it. That all has to be submitted with the health certificate in order to be allowed on a plane if they're sedated. Right. So it can be done. I really question it because I do a lot of animal shipping with exotics, like for zoos and stuff. And we rarely ever sedate anything just because of the risks.
I think, you know what, I think it's changed over time because working with Rochelle and learning about the steps to get an animal acclimated to being confined in their crate prior to transport, they put a lot more effort into that. I would imagine the sedation, when it was used more prominently, was due to the fact that they weren't getting the animals prepared for travel. And they just figured sedate them, knock them out, and take them. But
absolutely.
The best way to do it is to get them acclimated to being confined, and then they're comfortable, and then you transport them that way.
Yeah, Zoo World now, it's completely changed. And when I started, everything is all about shaping and training and targeting. And you train, like in the olden days, you know, it was Crocodile Dundee to go get a blood sample from a big alligator or something. Now I work with parks that train their crocs to target, and they can target these 10-foot, 11-foot crocodiles. I can walk in the cage with it and I can do a physical and get a blood sample on that animal while it's targeted with no drugs, no sedation, no, bruticane or anything else. Right. So you're right. I mean, animal husbandry has changed dramatically for the better, which is really, really good news. Yeah.
For us watching, what does targeted mean?
Okay, I'm sorry. So targeting means, let's say I've got a alligator that I want to train to go into a crate so I can ship it from the zoo in Miami to a zoo in San Diego. Okay. So targeting means you literally put out a target. So like usually reptiles see color and they like bright colors. So let's say we have a red circle about this big on the end of a pole. And then you hold it in front of the crocodile or alligator. And then as soon as you do, you give them a treat, whether it's a mouse, a rat, a chicken. Believe it or not, we've trained our crocodiles at this one park to eat Jell-O. They absolutely love Jell-O cubes. So we make Jell-O plates, we cut it into cubes, then we use tongs. They go nuts over Jell-O. So you hold the target in front of the crate, they walk over to the target, they touch the target, you give them some Jell-O or whatever you're treating them with. Then eventually you put the little target a foot into the crate. So they have to kind of reach their nose in the crate. And, they're nervous because why are they walking in a crate? So they reach their nose in the crate, boom, you give them the Jell-O. Next thing you know, they're running in that crate, and then you give them the Jell-O, and they're very calm in there. So that's what targeting means, is it's training them, is shaping their behavior, conditioning them for rewarding positive behaviors so that you avoid negative behaviors and stressors.
Okay, fantastic.
So let me go back to this stuff about getting veterinary requirements. And this is important because I know that you've talked about health certificates and veterinarians signing health certificates for dogs and cats and rabbits. The veterinarian that signs it, they have to be USDA accredited to sign a health certificate. And they have to be, for a dog and a cat and a rabbit, they have to be a USDA 1 accreditation.
Category 1.
Category 1. For anything else, so I don't care if it's a spider, a fish, a bird, the alligator we just talked about, any zoo animal, it has to be what's called even a pot-bellied pig, has to be accredited to Category 2. And not every veterinarian, especially in private practice, is a Category 2. Why am I saying this? Because you're traveling someplace this weekend and it's Friday and you forgot to get the health certificate, and you run to the local family vet that you've been to for the last 20 years, and gosh, they're a Category 1, but you're traveling with a bird. You're out of luck. So
that I love it you brought that up. That is so good. And my recommendation for my fellow veterinarians is, why not just be a Category 2? Take both. Be Category 1 and 2. The difference as far as refresher modules is 3 to 6.
Right.
Be a Category 2.
Right. It's actually literally, honestly, it's only an extra 3 hours of training, and it doesn't cost extra.
Yeah.
And that's really the big difference, is that in that extra 3 hours, there are a specific set of modules that the veterinarian has to take to get them knowledgeable about the exotic animals. Because a lot of it has to do, especially with foreign animal diseases and transporting animals in and out of the country. Okay, so that go ahead.
I'm sorry. So let's say you're traveling with a horse. Does that fall under 1 or 2?
2. That's a 2. Yeah. So let's go back to that and talk about. My wife, again, I mentioned, is a veterinarian, and she just helped my neighbor, who's South African, move from the Congo Republic, where we live, which is basically the United States, back to South Africa with his dogs. And it was probably one of the most difficult health certificates she has ever done in her career, which is 30 years. And it just takes an incredible amount of paperwork. Now, the good news is that now there are places you can go. There's actually companies that veterinarians can sign up with, and it's called concierge service. You pay a fee, but they make your life so much easier because they know all the country documents, they know all the country regulations, they know everything that they need to know. They have it all at the touch of a fingerprint or a push button, and then they can get everything done for you. If you want to prepare ahead and you're a pet owner, whether we're talking about exotics, there are a lot of companies online now. And the one that I've had the best success with, and again, I don't work for these companies, so just full disclosure, I don't get paid by any of these companies. I'm just mentioning them because I've worked with them and I find them to be reputable. AirAnimal.com, AIRAnimal.com. They move animals all over the world. And you as a pet owner can contact them. Just go online. They have an information page. You send in your request, what you want to do. They get back to you right away. And they say, here's what we need to do. And then they help you as a pet owner. And they also have a list of USDA 1 and 2 veterinarians in your area that they can hook you up with so you can get everything done. That's important because with transferring to some of these countries, they have to have the veterinarian sign off. That has to be endorsed by a USDA veterinarian at the export city and then back to the veterinarian for a second sign off before that animal leaves. Again, every country is different. But my point is, you contact some of these companies, you pay for the service, but it's worth every penny. They take all the headaches away from you, and they make it a lot easier. Otherwise, you get to the airport and you realize, oh, God, I didn't get the stamp from the USDA. My flight leaves in 2 hours. Guess what? Bye-bye, pet. Or you just miss your flight because you're not taking it with you. They're not going to put it on the plane.
Yeah. It's really difficult as far as the requirements. And they vary by, as you're saying, vary by country. So a service that's going to assist the veterinarian is really helpful. I mentioned offline with you, I am in practice. I do part-time work. And for your routine clinical veterinarian in practice, you're going from room to room. You might be doing surgeries. And then all of a sudden, the appointment for a health certificate throws you off because mentally now I've got to get a different thought pattern. I've got to now research something. So a service to provide that for them is a huge help for your veterinarian that's working and everything. But I do highly recommend though my fellow veterinarians to get involved though. If you can do them. And again, become a Category 1 and 2 accredited veterinarian so that you're available and able to assist in these process. But it is tedious. I think some folks I've heard from fellow veterinarians saying that they refuse to do them now because they're so tedious, and if one mistake, then they're held accountable, and they don't want to do them. I even met a fellow veterinarian that works for AVMA PLIT, and she was saying there's claims against veterinarians based upon errors on international health certificates and pet owners sues, and because it is an ordeal if the animals don't meet the requirements. Either they're coming back or they might have to be, well, that's a fee. Mandatory quarantining, if that's allowed in that country, that's a fee. So you do have to cross all T's and dot all I's in reference to the international health certificates. But
a lot of veterinarians will do dogs and cats interstate because they're pretty easy. I mean, they're very easy. But when you start getting into these international ones, it can be an incredible challenge.
But even with the domestic travel ones, things have changed over the years, because the simple 7001 form, a lot of the states are doing away with that. So you have to go through companies such that has the services, a GVL. There's a few others too. And actually, there's certain states have their own electronic certificates of veterinary inspection, because the APHIS 7001 form is readily available online. And I always say Mickey Mouse could sign it and I wouldn't even know the difference. So each states are now determining they have to make sure that the veterinarian, number one, meets those accreditation standards, because there are also fellow veterinarians that are signing these documents for travel and are not even accredited, or their accreditation is expired. So it's a validation system.
Yeah. I know that we're got to watch our time, so I just wanted to end up with some other really important things. And going back to the initial anecdote about the woman trying to get to Australia with her iguana, a lot of countries, foreign countries, will not allow exotic pets. Some do. Please do your homework. I actually did have a client who was making an ungodly amount of money in IT, and he was transferred to one of these countries that wouldn't let him bring his pet iguana. He tried everything under the sun to do it legally, and absolutely not. And he turned down a job, and this was in, I think, 1994. He turned down a job at the time for $450,000 a year. So 94, that was a ton of money, because they wouldn't let him bring his pet iguana. So do your homework, because some of these countries will not allow you to bring your pets. Some of them will let you to bring exotics, but then they have limits. Okay, maybe a rabbit's okay or a bird is okay. No way you're going to bring a lizard or anything else. A ferret, something like that. So
yeah, let me add to that too. I know you're talking exotics, but folks also need to realize for your dogs going, or even sometimes if folks have the hybrid cats going to a lot of European countries, they won't allow it. So be mindful of where you're going and the entry requirements for animals, because they will deny, like you're saying, exotics. They can also say no to a pit bull or breeds that they feel are dangerous. So be mindful of that.
Yeah. Let me just end on this last little vignette again. A colleague of mine who's literally a world famous avian veterinarian, deals with a lot of stars, very wealthy people. And one of his clients with his private jet wanted to fly his bird to a country that didn't allow it. And he goes, well, I'm just going to smuggle it in on my jet. And, I told my friend, I said, don't do that, man. It's because you get caught, you could lose your license and you could get fined. And anyway, he tried to smuggle it in and they got caught. Well, the guy had a lot of money. And he ended up just flying the bird back home in his private jet. He got away with it because he had money, but he still didn't get to take the bird in. So money doesn't buy the passage. Don't think you can get around it, okay? Check the rules and regulations first so that you don't end up having your heart broken and have something happen to your pet.
So, Dr. Mader, I wanted to ask very quickly, airanimal.com, I know they do the paperwork for exotic animals, but can people with cats and dogs go to them also?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, they're specialists in pet transportation.
Okay.
So absolutely.
Okay. Well, I know we want to know so much about your new book, so let's get into that.
Oh, thank you. Again, like I said, the book was written about, the storyline was about the year I applied for my specialty boards. And it essentially starts with me sending in this very rigorous application. I studied really hard for a year. And then the book ends with me taking the test and then finding out whether or not I passed. And since you already introduced me as a specialist, I passed. But it's about everything that happens in this animal hospital. And there's just an incredibly amazing, dedicated group of individuals, my receptionists, my technicians, my kennel staff, the other doctors that I work with. that put up with a tremendous amount of heartbreak and distress living in the inner city. I mean, literally, graffiti, gangs, drugs, hookers. We had one of my technicians was stabbed during the LA King riots and the Rodney King riots, and one of my clients was actually killed during the riots on his way into the hospital to pick up his cat. We said, the cat's fine here. The hospital's protected. We're surrounded by guns. Stay home. And he insisted on coming to get his cat. He tried to drive to get his cat, and he was killed during the riots. And it was about two blocks from the hospital. It's not a downer book. There's actually a lot of really fun stories in there. The whole thing is a series of vignettes tied together, and it's about humans and about pets, and it really is a celebration of the human-animal bond and what people will do to help promote that bond and make it last. And so it was a lot of fun. I'm very proud of it. I'm working on the sequel right now. It's won several literary awards. It was an Amazon bestseller. So I'm very humbled at how well it was accepted and how well it's done. Thank you for asking.
That's awesome.
You're welcome. Can you tell us another story from the book?
Sure. I actually, I want to end up with another story about transporting exotic pets on a plane. This isn't in this book, but this will be in the sequel. So you're going to get a little preview here. And this is the honest to God truth. Again, the really good stuff you just can't make up. So I had this client, very wealthy attorney, and she has a very strong attachment to her 2 pet sugar gliders. And for your audience that doesn't know what a sugar glider is, they're a little marsupial, not much bigger than about this. And they actually have little pouches and everything else, and they're nocturnal animals. They're really super incredibly cute, and they got great personalities, and they do well in pairs. So she had a pair of them, and because they're marsupials, they live in a pouch. And so she had a pouch that was about the size of a breast pocket on a shirt, and that pouch was on string, and she would keep the string around her neck, and then she would take the sugar gliders, put them in the pouch, and then tuck the pouch again between her anatomy where it wasn't seen, but they were kept nice and warm and protected. And the woman lived in Illinois, in Chicago, and she is a lawyer, so she had a practice in Illinois. She had a practice in Concrete Republic, and she would travel back and forth on an airline that you're familiar with. And she was a TSA pre-check, so she didn't go through the scanner. She went through the magnetometer. And again, for the audience that's not familiar with the difference, is the scanner is basically like an MRI, and you can see every body part. And if you're hiding something, you can see it. Magnetometer is basically just looking for metal. So if you're having something hidden on your body and it's not metal, you can walk through a magnetometer, and odds are nobody's going to find it. So this woman traveled back and forth several times between Chicago and Key West with her 2 little sugar gliders in their pouch tucked between her anatomy, and was doing just fine. Well, one day, apparently, she was on her way back to Chicago, left out of Key West, and I guess she had celebrated and had a little bit to drink, so she was a little bit tipsy. And I want to back up so that people can see it. As she was in first class, she pulled out her blouse, and she looked down the front of her blouse, and she started talking to her sugar gliders. Oh, you guys, how you doing? Oh, you're so cute. Always glad you guys travel with me. And the woman next to her, excuse me, ma'am, what are you doing? Because she saw her looking down and talking to her breasts. She goes, oh, I'm just talking to my little buddies. Do you want to see? So she did this. The woman next to her looked down and saw the little sugar gliders with their big brown eyes staring up at her. And she goes, oh, my God, they're beautiful. Look at them. They're almost identical. And she's talking about these sugar gliders that are hidden in a private part. And so she's looking down the front of her shirt. The owner's looking down the front of her shirt. They're talking to the things. The woman in the seat, or I guess it was a man in the seat behind her. Now, keep in mind, I'm a professional, right? And this woman is telling me this story, and I'm doing everything I can to keep from laughing my brains out, right? Because I'm a professional. I got to be serious. But I wanted to die laughing. So the person behind him saw the woman looking over down the shirt of my client, stood up, looked over the back of the seat, and goes, what are you all doing? And she goes, look down there. And so she held out real proudly. And the guy looks down and he goes, oh my God, they're beautiful. Wow. How long have you had them? And they're talking about the sugar gliders. Cabin attendant walks by and sees all this commotion. He goes, what's going on? And the woman goes, check this out. Look what she's got. And the cabin attendant looks down and goes, "Oh my God, oh, wait a minute, you can't have those on this plane."
Uh-oh.
And then things kind of went south. And so they got into an argument. The woman is a lawyer. I've traveled with them a zillion times, blah, blah, blah. Their emotional support. And long story short, cabin attendant told the captain. The captain ended up calling security. She got arrested when they landed.
Oh my.
So, well, if you're traveling with stuff, just do it right. Do it the right way. Then you don't have that headache.
Well, they've changed the regulations as far as emotional support animals in cabin. So, yeah.
I mean, she sued the airline. She had me write a letter. She had her doctor write a letter, but she ended up losing. And I think that was one of the cases, if you remember back. I think there was somebody with a peacock, somebody with a pig. It was a few different exotic animals that they pushed the envelope for emotional support. And finally, the airline said, "No, enough is enough."
Yeah.
That's hysterical.
I'm sure it's for those onlookers. It's like, what are they looking at? And just the descriptor. It's like, oh, they're beautiful. They're identical.
There's two of them. They're identical.
Yeah, I think they're supposed to be.
Yeah. I think that the kicker was when they said they're so furry.
Oh yeah.
That's probably not normal.
Yeah.
Anyway, I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to take any questions that you have. It's certainly been fun, and I thank you for letting me share my experiences.
No, this is great. This is great. Yeah.
Now, I was going to ask, it's not really common for people to travel with their exotic pets, is it? I would think it's not.
Well, again, depending on what it was, going back 40 years, I used to commonly carry snakes in my pocket. So if I would go someplace, if I was going someplace and I'd go to a vet conference and somebody had a snake they wanted me to take care of or take back with me, I just put it in my pocket because back then they didn't care. So I think everybody would like to travel with their pets if they could, because they like having their pets around for the human-animal bond. That's it's in the DNA of pet owners. I just think a lot of times people realize in advance that they can't, so they don't try and smuggle it in their anatomy like some people do.
Yeah, no. I mean, there's a reason behind it. So I know folks, yes, I mean, folks that don't have the typical dog or cat, that having a more exotic animal, it's just that there's more there's more risk with them being transported in cabin. Now, if you want to go by cargo, they can go by cargo as long as they're in a compliant crate container that complies with IATA, LER. It's great. But in cabin, there's a lot more restrictions in reference to that. I mean, the sugar gliders, God forbid, what if somebody got bit? There's things you got to start thinking about of the consequences too. So it's not as simple, straightforward. I could bring, you just got to think about some of the consequences too of certain animals being in that environment, getting stressed. What if it ran and you can't get it? Or what if it ran and went down underneath something and now it potentially can get exposed to or chew at some wires, or I don't know, whatever that's needed for the aircraft. What if it causes damage to that? So
you get a tarantula or a snake loose on an airplane and it goes and hides, that plane is grounded. Now you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost income. So there's a reason for it. And you bottom line is we don't want to put our pets at risk. And Greta, to your comment, the human animal bond is real. And whether it's a dog or a cat, or like I tell people, I have a pet frog that I've had for 19 years. I don't sit on the couch and watch TV with it, but I take care of it every day. I feed it and I talk to it and I have a bond with it. Would I want to travel with it? No, I wouldn't. But the bond is real. And we have to respect that people have different bonds with different pets. You may have an apartment or a house that allows you to have a dog or a cat. I might live in a small apartment in New York City. I can't have a dog or a cat, so I have a pet tarantula. Do I still love it? Yes. How long does it live? Can live 25 years. That animal's significant to me. So, it's very complicated. It is. And I think venues like this help educate people and help people learn their different options that they have, because there are options. Yeah, just because you're going someplace and you have something unusual doesn't mean you have to leave it behind. There are ways you can do it.
Or pet parents that own a bird or a snake, can you give them traveling tips on bringing them in cabin if they're even allowed?
Well, snakes aren't allowed anymore. Birds, some of the airlines will allow birds. I think the single most common question that I get from bird owners is, what kind of a tranquilizer should I give my bird? And I don't recommend it for several reasons. One is because if something goes wrong, you're SOL in the middle of a flight. But more importantly, birds have such a rapid metabolism. You give them a tranquilizer, it's only going to last for a few minutes. I mean, literally maybe an hour or two. And if you're on a flight to New York to San Francisco, it's a 6-hour flight. You're going to have to keep redosing them and redosing them. And the general rule in medicine is you don't redose tranquilizers. That's because you start building up the levels in the blood and in the liver, and things can go wrong badly. So I recommend that we talked about before, just habituating and training the animal to the carrier. That's the safest way to do it. And if you're traveling with a snake, you contact the carrier, you go to the IATA website and you get the proper caging and you can ship it in cargo.
Yep. I want to make one comment about birds that I've seen a mistake someone made. When you're shipping birds, especially by cargo, you would never ever want to put them in their actual bird cage.
No.
I've seen it happen. That is not acceptable. It's too much space for them during transport, and it's actually not enclosed. You want an enclosed crate for them. You can actually, what folks do often is get a regular dog crate that's IATA compliant, and they put a perch in if the perch is needed. All these modifications will be needed and everything for them, but never ever, like I said, I have seen it, unfortunately, folks transporting or wanting to transport birds in their routine cage.
Yeah.
Yep. I do, Dr. Bryant, I do know we met the one young lady who inherited a company to help transport exotic pets. I want to say it's a plane, but I don't think she inherited a plane. But we spoke with one lady who is in animal transportation, and she has one company, and then she ended up inheriting, I think it's called Air something, and she recommended that as a carrier or even a service that can help with the process of you taking a bird or even an exotic pet on a trip with you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to. Do you remember the young lady
we had her on there, and I vaguely remember. I don't remember exactly her name, so I'm sorry. But it's good their services out there.
I'm going to our site.
Thank you for recommending Air Animal, you said, or is it Animal Air? I'm sorry. Did you say
Air Animal?
That's great.
Yes.
For folks and everything, so they'll understand. And really, for anyone traveling with your pets, or exotic or not, before you do so, you do need to consult with someone to get that information. On my website, you have information there if you need it. I'm sure Dr. Doug will, if he's able to assist in that process too, or as he mentioned, Air Animal. But you should never think that, I can do this. It's simple. It's not simple. It really is a detailed process when transporting pets, exotic or not.
I wanted to just share, Dr. Mater, I have it up now. The company I was trying to remember is called Airborne Animals. Mm-hmm. And they ship exotic pets, birds, as well as cats and dogs.
That was Rebecca, right? Rebecca, I forget the last name.
I don't remember the young lady. I just went, because we have Airborne Animals on our site. So I just pulled them up, and I wanted to share that with Dr. Mater.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Well, good.
You're welcome.
Well, gosh, time has flown by. Thank you so much, Dr. Doug. I really appreciate you being here and sharing your wisdom and sharing those interesting stories. You have some stories to tell, I'm sure. There's some very interesting stories.
It was definitely great meeting you, Dr. Mater.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Any further thoughts with us?
No, I mean, maybe sometime down the road we can get back together and talk about evacuation with pets if you haven't done that, because I live on an island.
That would be great.
unfortunately, twice in the last 35 years, we've had to evacuate due to hurricanes. So, you know, and it could be dogs, cats, exotics, birds, fish, all that kind of stuff. That takes a whole different meaning when you're evacuating a family and you have your pets too. That's a topic that maybe we can discuss down the road.
That's a great topic. And actually, I know we won't go into detail, but folks should start preparing now. Don't prepare for it when it happens.
Way ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. I love it. Love it.
We certainly will. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Mader, for coming on with us. We will definitely have you back next year so we can talk about evacuation preparation and traveling with exotic animals. This hour flew by very quickly, and I'm glad that it did. We had a great time with you. Thank you so much again for coming on.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Well, everyone, you have a fantastic weekend, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Let's see.